Julie coming back in, or Julie? No. There we go. Yeah, they can all come in and wait, yeah. That way there we can have, quiet. Oh, wow.
Hi, Jody. Derry.
Good afternoon. What? You want to introduce him, you said?
More dollars into our region.
Okay. All right, it's 2:03 p.m. on July 24th, Wednesday. This is a workshop for the Board of Commissioners. Call the meeting to order. Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you want a line of duty desk for law officers, military desks, both meetings or this
Just
meeting?
this evening.
This evening?
Yes, but you
Okay.
said you wanted to introduce him.
Yes. Executive Director of the Association of ONC Counties, Rocky McVeigh, former commissioner, I think one of the best commissioners we ever had. Would you stand up, please? I know you weren't anticipating me to introduce you. Thanks for being here today.
All right. So do we have any amendments to the agenda? Commissioner Gold?
I'd like to interchange A and B under projects simply because we've got a lot of people who have to get back to their jobs. And it involves a lot. And I talked to the forest people, and they are willing to do that. So.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boyce,
Yes.
Chair Pash.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, so we're going to come in to speak, we're going to have Ms. Schmelzer about code compliance issues and process presentation.
Yes, David Fortman, who is our code enforcement officer, will actually be leading the discussion about the code enforcement issues. And Commissioner Gold, as the liaison, will be steering that conversation as well. Basically looking to see what is everybody doing as far as code enforcement goes, and how can we help each other to make it a smoother process and a more effective process. So, Mr. Fortman, if you would please start.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I promise I'll be a lot shorter than I usually am.
There we go. Thank you,
Okay.
sir.
My opening remarks is code enforcement involves a lot of areas of expertise, and that's what you have in front of you, is experts from different agencies looking at the problem. Code enforcement, of course, is about safety. It's about keeping our communities, our people safe, and our residents safe, and dealing with the quality of life issues. So with that, I'd like to do is just have the different participants here today introduce themselves and what agency and what their primary agency's responsibility, how they fit into.
You have to go up to the mic, everyone will have to step up to the microphone and pull one of the microphones that best fits you, closest to you. Thank you.
My name is Garrett Thompson. I'm with the City of Brookings. I'm building official and code enforcement officer for the municipality.
Okay, great. Who's next?
Jim is okay.
Mr. Colon?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Jim Cullen, Curry County Assessor. I'm not really part of the code enforcement. I'm involved in this because we in assessment taxation could probably be of some assistance in the process.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Tony Barron, Public Works Director for the City of Brookings.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Kelly Beebe, District Manager for Harbor Sanitary District and responsible for code enforcement for the sewer system in Harbor.
Thank you.
I'm Terry Richards. I'm the City Administrator for Port Orford. Thank you for this meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ben Cannon, Public Health, and with me I've got Greg Desmond, our new Environmental Health Inspector, and Karen, our Environmental Health Administrative Assistant.
Thank you.
Question real quick.
Are we done with the,
Is he in addition to Ken or not in replacing Ken?
In addition to.
Great news. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair.
next?
Gary Milliman, I'm the municipal court judge in Port Orford and one of two municipal judges in Brookings. Code enforcement, nuisance abatement cases come before the courts in both of those communities. And I'm engaged in adjudicating those cases.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is David Ash. I'm with the Medford DEQ office. I oversee some of the permitted facilities in this area, transfer stations and landfills, and also respond to complaints.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Becky Crockett. I'm the Curry County Planning Director, and my job is to address these people's issues when they decide to come in and get legal after Dave has cited them for wrongdoing.
Thank you.
As you can see, other participants, as you can see, quite a diverse group of people. Other participants that were trying to be here today that got their schedules crashed at the last minute include several law enforcement officials from the city and from the county. Fire department districts are also playing a role in this. So they, I'm sorry that we could not get them in front of you. What I'd like to do is turn this to our panel and talk about a suggestion a very learned man gave me, and start with a problem and end with a solution, and have each of the different focuses talk about what their code enforcement are, what problems they have, what do they need, and what kind of solutions they found. But there are two other sets of introductions here we haven't done. How many people here are from the community? Anybody? Okay. You also are code enforcement people. You're the eyes and ears of keeping our neighborhoods safe. In my short tenure with the county here, 4 people have died that I've been working with, that were living in substandard conditions. You're getting involved in helping your neighbors. You're getting involved in mowing your lawns and cleaning the trash up. Set examples. I always laugh when you go mow your lawn and everybody else in the neighborhood does it that weekend. So you're code enforcement officers also. And getting us help and getting us into the communities for these people that you see the trash stacking up are the ones that we can get them to the VA, get them to the health services. So you are also code enforcement officers. There's one more group of code enforcement officers in the room, and this is our directors and our political leaders. Your role has been to set the statutes, to set the tone of where we go with these programs, what we expected from our community. Our director, like Ms. Schnauzer, is my boss, sets the tone of how we enforce it and trying to keep the consistency. Your responsibility, too, is awesome to protect the community from what's happening here. I didn't introduce myself and what I enforce. As code enforcement for Curry County, I enforce the sanitation safety laws, fire laws for the fire districts, building zoning, animals, park regulations. Sounds like a lot, but I'm going to turn it back to the board and say, you folks put some good tools together in your ordinances. You gave the code enforcement officer, whether it's me or anybody else, enough tools in our toolbox to be able to deal with issues. Because I deal with issues on sanitation or health, and over here is their dog, and over here is zoning and all the other issues. So I want to start by thanking you folks for the work you've done and the work you're doing to support this program. So may I turn this out and talk about some problems and success stories of where we go? Thank you.
So some of the problems in Brookings City proper that I've been dealing with lately, illegal camping of transient individuals, illegally parked and lived in travel trailers and RVs. Unfortunately, it seems like every time I deal with one of those issues, it just pushes it into the county. So a partnership would be appropriate for those issues. A lot of the other issues I find are, they do cross the city lines. We do have a lot of invasive species. We have gorse that is on the north end of our city line. We have a lot of jubata grass, which looks like pampas grass, everybody calls it such. That's another issue. That's something I've been dealing with. Unfortunately, with the invasive species, that is really reliant upon multi-partners. It's has a lot to do with private property owners as well. So that's a kind of a tough deal. The transients living on private property, that's something that I've struggled to get under control. The only mechanism I have in place is to cite the property owner themselves for allowing illegal camping that goes against their zoning. So that's kind of an unfortunate way to deal with the problem, but it's the only tool I have. As far as the illegal camping, we can allow the residing of a camper or travel trailer for 14 calendar days in a year if you have an open building permit. So that creates a lot of issues. I was telling Dave Fortman earlier that we have one individual that we just, well, for lack of a better word, trespassed them out of the city in their trailer, and now they moved out onto the south bank of the Chetco Road, which now becomes David's problem. So it's a little unfortunate. But so the code enforcement's been the smaller portion of my job, of course, because of my other job duties, but it's something that I'm keeping at a manageable level. So I have quite a lot of successes. A few what I would like to think of as failures, just because I resolved the issue, but I didn't resolve it in a way that made me feel good at the end of the day. So anyways, I always look forward to learning more so that I can do my job more efficiently and for the betterment of the population.
I have a comment, though, I wanted to ask you. I just left, actually, I was down in Del Mar last week, and I noticed on all their beaches where there has been, in years past, a lot of trailers that have tried to park overnight. They post signs, and down there they have an ordinance. I asked one of the city officials down there, they have an ordinance of no parking or staying between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. And they have to post one of those signs every quarter of a mile. I know that would be a pretty large expense, but that would certainly be a way to clear a highway or a road of that if we were to enact an ordinance like that in certain areas. The city of Brookings may want to do that, the county may want to look to do that, but that's how they dealt with it, was to post signs that say no camping and or overnight parking during the hour, from I think it was 9 or 10 at night until 5 a.m., which stopped people from spending the night.
Absolutely. And if we partnered with different municipalities and ODOT, that would be one way to help control that issue.
Well, this is a thing that the whole county has to deal with, and Brookings and all of our cities this is a partnership. We all have a partnership here. So I believe this board and this people in this room all want to work together toward that for the betterment of this county, for the citizens. So I'm sure our doors are wide open for that.
You know, states put up the signs. Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Not unless they have any questions for me. Just to follow up on the beach. The city of Brookings proper really only has one beach access, and that's Mill Beach. And Mill Beach is a park, so it actually has its own regulations. We don't manage the beach, we manage the access point itself. The highways, though, that's all ODOT. So ODOT's posted signage on all of the turnouts on Checo Avenue and north. And, you know, we don't go any further than the bridge, so that's county beyond there. So really, everything's privately accessed, private property. So we don't really have the issues, I think, that you're addressing per se in our jurisdiction. Only one we have is really Mill Beach.
Could we also maybe do a mailing to homeowners or something like that that says, you know, there is no camping allowed on private property, you know, or send them a list of the ordinances that the city currently has, so that their eyes are wide open. If they break the law, then
Right.
they can expect a code enforcement officer to knock on their door.
Right. We don't have the issue that I think that you may have north. Like I said, the coastline in Brookings is pretty rocky, pretty high cliff. There's not a lot of access there. There are some vacant land that are private property owners. We've abated several properties for illegal camping. We stay on it, but there's only a half a dozen of them.
Okay.
And as I say, when we get notification, we abate immediately, and property owners are usually they're very responsive. The amount of trash is I have photos that will just blow your mind, and how much garbage and how much money it costs these private property owners to actually clean up the mess, because it's not us that does it.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else?
Harbor is an interesting community. I am thrilled to have David Fortman aboard, because I haven't had anybody to work with code enforcement until he came on. We've worked numerous cases together so far. We have people living in garages, living in storage sheds. We have garbage on properties that's unbelievable. Raw sewage going into storm drains, going down embankments and into creekways. I've worked on a couple of those. Harbor Sanitary District doesn't have the authority and the legal grounds in some of these cases to go out and deal with them on our own. And that's where David has played a really big role in me being able to contact him and use the authority of the county to go out and solve some of these problems. I think that working with the county together, it makes a really good team. We can be the eyes and ears down there, but have a place to go when we find these.
I think another thing we should look at, Ms. Schmelzer, is the possibility of finding ways to fund at least a part-time but another code enforcement officer for this county. Maybe we can partner with the cities or other organizations to help fund that, because I know personally Mr. Fortman's workload right now is unbelievable, and I think the county would be well served to at least look at another part-time or full-time code enforcement officer and ways to fund that. Commissioner Gold?
Kelly, I know when we had our meeting together on these issues, you had mentioned that going into some of these properties, they were listed as one-family dwellings, and then all of a sudden they turned into duplexes. And so we've not only have the issue of the garbage and sewage and all of that, but we also have the issue of people not getting the proper permits and so forth. And so I think we need to work together to make sure that these things are done properly, and that there's some process, formal process that we go through in order to make sure that things are done in the right way, and that all of the departments are notified, like the tax assessor's office, the planning department, and so forth. So I really feel strongly that there needs to be some protocol set in place so that things could be addressed in the proper manner.
There are numerous cases where we have found second dwellings, gone to the assessor's office, and they are not being assessed property taxes. Over the years, I've found quite a few broads being converted to a second home, being sold then to another owner as a second home, and it's never been assessed, never been reported anywhere, no permits issued.
We're currently dealing with that.
I do think, I agree with Commissioner Gold, we need some type of protocol, because if you're finding that, there's the planning side, did they get the correct permits, but we also have that building safety side, and we have those life safety issues that we have to be looking at. So it definitely needs some type of coordination between the agencies, where if one finds one, the other ones are made aware of it, so they can try and resolve it together. I mean, you were just talking about raw sewage, and right away I'm thinking, isn't that a DEQ issue, so,
And we've been on that merry-go-round now until David came along. I would call DEQ, and they would say it's county's responsibility to enforce. And so we haven't had a lot of help down there in the last several years, especially since you've lost the county sanitarian.
And that's why I would hope different organizations in this county would let down their guard just a little bit, and let's all communicate better with each other. And let's be a team, and let's attack this, because our job is to protect the citizens of this county. Like Mr. Fortman said, 4 people have died since he's come on here, and I'm hearing a lot of stories of raw sewage running out down hillsides and into people's yards, and all kinds of buildings being built that don't even exist on the maps anyway. So I think it's time that the county works together, and we communicate better with each other. Commissioner Boyce?
I'm glad to hear you mention perhaps a second code enforcement officer. We've talked about that quite a bit even last year. Maybe at the end we could direct staff, if there's board agreement, to take a look at how that financing, where it would come from and how we can put that in place. And if we can't afford a second code enforcement officer right now, we've also been discussing getting Mr. Fortman some staff that can do some of the legwork that would be easier to do, and he wouldn't have a pile up on his desk. So
Right.
maybe at the end of the meeting we can do that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want everyone in here to know that this board is very interested in what's going on in this county, and we want to help solve the problems in it. So anything you have to say on this, let's talk about it.
Good afternoon again. So I'm with the DEQ. I'm a solid waste specialist. Primarily, I deal with permitted facilities. I've mentioned earlier transfer stations and landfills, composters, that sort of thing. But I do get complaints, and it wasn't until about 6 or 8 months ago that I was actually involved in this county's complaints. I had Jackson and Josephine County prior. There were some changes in responsibilities, so I ended up with this county about the same time that Dave came on board. And I think I had 3 complaints at that time. Dave took care of all of them. I haven't had to deal with another single complaint since. So kudos to Dave.
Amen to that.
But the other 2 counties that I deal with have a lot of those same issues. It's the homeless, people with mental health issues, people being abused by either elders or youths, and so they end up with trash properties and people living where they're not supposed to be living, doing all those sorts of things. Septic running down, into ditches and so forth. And that's usually from unpermitted structures. And when we run into the whole unpermitted structure thing, we usually dump that back on the counties or the cities, because it's not something that our on-site program has the authority to deal with. From a solid waste standpoint, we can kind of deal with it, but it's a little bit out of the box. So I just wanted to address that because you guys are
Okay.
concerned.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Megan Fagundes. I'm also with the DEQ. I run the open burn program for 5 counties in Southwest Oregon, and I just took over Curry County 2 years ago, and Dave has been a really big help since he came on, to echo what David said. But I'm also leaving DEQ within the next week and taking a job at ODOT, so there's going to be kind of a gap in interim. Our Coos Bay office is going to be covering, and his name's Martin Apps. I have contact information for him. But I echo everything David said. Basically, open burning is normally a symptom of people's lifestyle in regards to homelessness or poverty or all the other things. But we definitely have guidance that we have to follow that isn't always conducive to transients or people like that. And so
I found it hard to enforce, but I have had some successes. So, yeah, I appreciate you guys' time today, and I can get contact information for whoever, for the new guy who's going to be taking over.
Thank you.
But Dave has been a great thing for the county. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Ben Cannon with Public Health. So we deal mainly with any kind of services that are offered to the public: food, pool, lodging, water systems, and then kind of an additional thing that we deal with that's not talked about as much as animal bites. And we've worked with Dave on mostly on lodging, so RV facilities, hotels, and then animal bites. And we've had great success tackling those issues there. We've had several properties, RV sites, that have been out of compliance with the regulations, the food, pool, lodging regulations, and we've worked with Dave on that and remediating those. We've also recently been pushing for an increase or a greater connection on our animal bite reporting. And we've seen great success in that we're getting more reports, but it certainly causes a lot more work for Dave when we get these reports. For example, just this weekend, we had a report from Oregon State Police about a animal bite that happened down South County at a state park. And so when we get that call, we work with our communicable disease coordinator, and they ensure that the individual who received that bite is getting the care that they need, and ensuring that the dog is handled properly. And Dave gets involved whenever we have any kind of concerns there.
All right.
Yeah.
Julie?
I have a question. So many times, these violation sites become a matter where you have several campers there or several parties, and it just starts growing and growing,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of garbage and trash and accumulation, or sometimes it's just a single party that we see this accumulation. And Mr. Fortman can go out there and clean it up, but it just goes right back to the same situation. A lot of it ends up being that it's really a mental health issue. Does your agency get involved in, perhaps after Mr. Fortman's done working with somebody who may be classified as a hoarder, for example? Do you step in and then work with them, or have services so we are not just repeating the cycle and expending the tax dollars to keep re-cleaning up the same mess?
Certainly not necessarily from a compliance standpoint of view, but we certainly offer those services, and we make referrals as needed or necessary. We can't necessarily force anybody into services unless they're court ordered or that goes through that process. So we can make those referrals, and we do and have in the past.
So as part of our compliance program, if we get somebody in the court system, we could ask the judge for that to be a referral, so they have that ongoing care.
And, we get that through substance use treatment as well. We get court orders for that, mental health therapy as well, so.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think we have Port Orford next.
Again, I'm Terry Richards. I'm the city administrator for Port Orford. And there's really one word to explain it, and that is Port Orford, right? We have ongoing issues that are no different than Brookings or Gold Beach. We have our ordinances, and Port Orford is complaint-driven. And those complaints come in to me, and then I have to deal with them within a certain amount of time, of course, but also do my other duties as well. And I have reached out to Dave, and he's asked me to come here, which is kind of out of my bailiwick here, but and try to explain to you, we have a situation currently. This was a very well-known drug house. No floors, very dirty. They turned their water off. They had no sewer. When I first came to Port Orford, it was explained to me, don't ever go there. It has MRSA. And it's like, where's county health? Why hasn't something been done for this property? Why is it still in this situation? a year or so ago, people living in there, and this is one of the very oldest rock buildings we have. It was part wood, part rock, and it caught fire for whatever it was that they were doing inside, and partially burned. And the people went away for a little bit, no cleanup, nasty mess, and then next thing we know, there's people living in there, and our officers are trying to investigate, and they take a step and they end up in human feces. And letters can be sent from my desk and ignored. Letters can come from maybe the county, I don't know. We haven't had that help. Currently, they have moved in RVs, and we too have a code that says that you cannot live in an RV on a city lot. You cannot park it on the city right-of-way. You have to get a permit for anything over 14 days. That 14 days is mostly for your guests. When you have family who want to come and visit you, we allow you 14 days, and then they have to go around and come back. But seems to be no help for this property. We send them letters, you are in violation of code, you cannot be living here, you need to find someplace else to go, and they say we have no place else to go. Another piece of property, it should be burnt down. It too, dirt floor on part of it. You drive by at night, you can see the light coming through the walls. The garbage piled up out back. The neighbors have been into the office multiple times to complain because of the human feces. They are allowing other people to camp in their backyard. Heavy rains just washes it right down into the neighbor's yard. I remember being at a LIPSIC meeting here and asking County Health if there was any help, and they said no. So DEQ was at a meeting, and I said, what can you guys do to help me? It's a DEQ issue, isn't it? No. Well, if my vac truck that we just sucked out some sewer issue was to leak going down the highway, I'm sure the city would have been fined for it. But there's no help for these situations. The city does not have the finances to go in and abate like other cities do. A very good gentleman in town bought a hoarder's property. It cost him thousands, well over $20,000 just in the garbage service. And they gave him a break on it because there was so much. So how does Port Orford go in and abate these places? And then these people say, well, if you do this, then I have no place to go. Well, we've just added to the homeless situation. So anybody that can come together and find some kind of a solution, Port Orford would give you a day on the calendar, I'm sure.
Do we have any suggestions in here?
I just have a question, Terry. So, a lot of times I know when code enforcement, and I'm not sure if Mr. Fortman does this, but in a lot of areas, when they go out and they address these homeless people or people that have needs, there's always an organization there to kind of help step in and say, well, I know you're being kicked out of here, I realize you're homeless, but I can help you find housing here, or I can help you get some services here. Is there anyone providing that in Port Orford that you can rely on for help?
Coast Community Health will help, but they cannot go to the people have to go to them. Another situation I did not know this gentleman was living in his camp trailer on the edge of somebody's property that he cared for many, many years, and those people are gone. He needs to get off the city right-of-way, and he has no place to go because he has a residual from an accident, and everybody thinks he's a druggie because his head he has no control. Well, he's a very good person, a very nice man, but because of this, nobody will take him, nobody will allow him to live in their RV park because they're afraid that it'll, scare off other people. And I called Coast Community Health, what can we do to help this man? He has to come to us. And when they don't go to them, what do? I mean, I can't throw them in my car and say, go talk to this guy. So, you know, it's a catch-22 no matter how you look at it.
Commissioner Gold?
Would it help if the county had some sort of MOU with Port Orford to assist in some of these things? I don't know.
It would be a great help if, you know, like I said, our budget, we would love to be able to do what we could to help, you know, pay for a part-time person with maybe Gold Beach or even Harbor or somebody, but I'd have to talk real sweet to the finance director to find that money.
Okay, I think that's what this meeting's all about, so we can come up with some solutions that would help everybody work together in their best interests. So I was just throwing that out. I don't know that that's going to happen, but
It's a very good idea. I've heard of job sharing before, and it's worked very well for some cities in something like office staff. So I don't know how it would work here for code enforcement or what else, but if we could figure that out, I'm pretty sure we could figure out a way to be a part of it.
And that's what I was just talking to Ms. Melzer about a while ago, is somehow working together with the cities and having a joint code enforcement officer help for Mr. Fortman so that we can expand a little bit on some of the enforcement. One quick question before you step away. Has the city moved to condemn those properties?
Not yet.
Because that would be a good first step to the landowner, to let them know if you don't do something, we're going to condemn your property. That's a pretty good shaker.
It is. Let's see. There was, I'm sorry, can't remember what it's called now. We were going to move forward with, it involved building department, and it meant that the county building official was going to be the chair of this group.
Is it the Board of Appeals?
Yes, thank you. And my special advisor here explained how a lot of that worked, and you know, the council has not, it's on a continuing action item on our agenda, but it's not something that's been brought forward and seriously talked about yet.
That would certainly move things along, though, I think, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Milliman? Thanks for coming, sir.
Sure. Backing up Terry here a little bit. When all else fails, both in Brookings and Port Orford, the nuisance property is often cited into municipal court for the judge to deal with. So I've been dealing with a couple of different aspects of this, primarily properties that have become a public nuisance, where the house is run down, the house is uninhabitable yet inhabited, where there are vehicles, unlicensed vehicles of various sizes and shapes stored on the property, weeds growing up, chickens running everywhere, other livestock and household pets, if you will, with just a number of, you know, the typical thing that you might expect to see on a nuisance property. And then I've also been dealing in Port Orford with a few of the trailers that are RVs that are parked all or in part on the public right-of-way. So I typically hear those cases, and here's what I found. The property owners, or the parties who are the violators, lack the resources to deal with the problem. If they had the resources to fix up their properties, they would have done it. But they don't. They don't have the resources. The properties have become so far into disrepair that in some cases the cost of making those repairs exceeds the value of the property. I've issued abatement orders ordering the property owners to clean up the property, or authorizing the city to clean up the property and bill the cost of that as a lien on the property. Again, the cities have to have the financial resources to be able to undertake the work. It could be in the thousands of dollars to undertake the abatement. Brookings has done some of those, working in cooperation with CTR, where CTR actually comes in and does the abatement work. And the city has paid the bill and filed the lien and waits, and it could be decades before you receive reimbursement. And I will come up with some ideas on this. Other residents become frustrated because of the length of time that it takes to go through the due process of notifying the property owners that their property is a nuisance and holding the hearings and then subsequent notices and finally ending up in the judicial system. So I've levied fines up to $7,500 in addition to the cost of the abatement on properties that have been found to be nuisance properties. But again, that gets recorded as a lien, and who knows when those fines will be paid or when the cost of the abatement could be recovered. So here are a couple of thoughts. I've worked, and I don't know if any of these are relevant or eligible for Curry County, but it might be worth looking at. I've worked in 2 communities in the past where their entire code enforcement program was funded through the Community Development Block Grant Program. And it wasn't just code enforcement. Those 2 cities had active code enforcement departments, up to 5 and 6 code enforcement officers at any one time. But those code enforcement officers also were assigned the duties of helping the property owners find resources, financial resources and other volunteer resources to clean up their properties. And they were able to, in some cases, secure the resources of volunteer organizations in town to help property owners clean up the properties, or find resources through low-interest loans, also funded through CDBG, to fix up the properties or do the abatement, or in some cases, small grants from CDBG or from urban renewal in those cities that had an urban renewal agency to undertake those activities. Some cities also applied a very controversial topic of mandatory garbage collection, where every homeowner property is required to have regular garbage collection service. I know in some of these cases, part of the problem has been that the property owner has amassed a huge amount of garbage in bags and on trucks on their property, and they don't contract for collection services. That could be another approach. Perhaps some of our banks who are looking for ways to qualify for credits under the Community Reinvestment Act would be willing to consider a no-interest line of credit or small loans or small grants to assist property owners or assist cities in handling the abatement costs, perhaps financing the abatement costs and then under a no-interest line of credit and recovering those costs when and if the money is paid or over some lengthy period. I will tell you that in my experience, code enforcement is labor intensive. I commend anyone who's trying to do it by themselves in Curry County. I have examples of nuisance properties across the street from my residence that's located in the unincorporated area. That alone is going to take a major effort by a code enforcement officer. And I presume there are dozens of those types of properties. In this case, it's a house that's been under construction for more than 15 years. And the property is currently occupied by residents in 2 travel trailers that are not connected to any kind of utilities. So that does require some attention. So it's labor intensive, and it also requires strong political support. You need to be backing these code enforcement folks up, because when you start getting people showing up in your board chambers or your city council meetings complaining about the heavy-handed code enforcement officer, well, it's important to keep that activity in check, but it's also important not to go with the complainant's story.
Gary, sometimes those comments come in line in the grocery store.
Right. So I just implore you to, when you get the program going, and you pick the good people that you have doing the work, back them up.
Thank you, sir.
Happy to contribute anything else I can.
Thank you.
I'll add one more addition, just the city of Brookings process. We have, when we receive a complaint, there's typically a 10-day notice of abatement that's issued. If it's a repeat offender, we've actually recently, within the last several months, changed our code to allow our summary abatement process to skip over the 10-day abatement process. So it actually helps our code enforcement officer on repeat offenders to say, we've already talked to you about this, we've been through this process, we're just going to give you a citation right now. And that's something that the county, if it doesn't have, can help the code enforcement officer by giving them those options to handle repeat offenders in a much more stern approach. I think our code in the city in the past has been very lenient. I know that we issue abatement, and I was a code enforcement officer for about 8 months when we were transitioning staff, but I know my experience with some properties that had a significant amount of garbage collected. As Gary mentioned, we threatened to lien, and the magically stuff starts to happen. But the process of issuing the abatement, sending the notices, following up, getting them into court, then you have a judge who is lenient, giving them extra time, and then giving them more time. And now you have property owners around that abatement property starting to come into council meetings and really complaining. And so the summary abatement's a really big help. It just gives our code enforcement officer and anyone that our city manager elects to give that authority to just cite on scene. So that's a good tool to help too.
Counsel?
Thank you. This question might be for Gary, but maybe you could answer it too. I've seen where the local municipal court judge, instead of giving more time, will actually say, I'm going to find you guilty, I'm going to impose a $500 fine, but if you clean this up in 30 days, I'll dismiss all this. And Gary, I don't know if you've ever been able to work with somebody that way, or what kind of solutions you're using from the bench up there.
Absolutely, I've done that, particularly in Port Orford. Just to note, there are two judges in Brookings, and we have somewhat different philosophies on this topic of continuation of efforts. But yes, you can. I've done that several times, and that works as a very good incentive.
Thanks. Commissioner Gold?
I just have one question, Gary. In your courts, do you just handle the Port Orford area and the Brookings area, or do you handle all of the county?
Jurisdiction is within the city limits of Brookings and the city limits of Port Orford. And I don't know if there's a mechanism for expanding that jurisdiction under any kind of intergovernmental agreement.
Okay.
That would be a question for your counsel.
We're actually looking into justice courts right now that could handle this kind of thing and expanding the city limits to do that, to reduce the amount of cost that it would take a county to pursue.
Yeah.
So.
You have 3 existing municipal courts that, quite frankly, are not overworked. So if there's a way to piggyback on the existing systems, I'd encourage you to consider that.
Thank you. Anyone else have any further comments?
If I might introduce myself, my name is Bob Larson. I'm currently the fire chief in Harbor, Oregon. I've been in that position since September 10th of last year, so many of you don't know me, probably more familiar with the previous chief.
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to make some brief comments based from a fire perspective only. I won't care to get into individual issues because some of the testimony I've heard today, believe me, we have every one of those sitting in Harbor, Oregon, and I'm aware of many of them. The county code enforcement officer asked me if I'd come up and speak today and immediately prior to coming up here, I did have a fairly lengthy conference with Brookings Fire Chief Jim Watson. So we kind of got our heads together and came to a kind of a consensus of what would help us as fire departments. And I think what would be very helpful, Jim and I agree that if we had something on the books that would clearly state to the citizens, you know, what we can expect and what we can enforce regarding weed abatements and probably the abandoned dwellings, other things that we have going on in our districts. And my thought was, I'm not so interested in, you know, being able to issue citations and take enforcement actions, because I think that with the county's code enforcement officer, it'd be very nice to leave that in his area of responsibility. But it'd be very nice if I could go out and show somebody a statute that says, okay, these time of year, this type of dwelling, this type of hazard, that we'd like to be able to mitigate it. I do that now, but it's just on a personal level saying, you know, recommending to a homeowner that you clean the property up and abate the fire hazard. And that's kind of the perspective that I'm coming from. And if there were something on the books, county ordinance, city ordinance, that we could turn to, I feel much more comfortable talking to someone when I've got a statute to back me up and my position. And I think that would be, we get complaints all the time, and of course people believe if it's a fire hazard, then it's the fire chief's job to mitigate it. And you know, that's not going to go too far. I could only talk around the issue so many minutes and then have to do something. So
Right. Commissioner Gold?
That's one of the reasons we're having this meeting, is because we all need to work together to come up with some kind of protocol, so we're helping each other take care of all of these issues and be a safer county and a cleaner county. So
I had, to go along with that, Mrs. Gold, I had met with the county code enforcement officer and also a rep from DEQ, and they came and visited, and I think we're all in agreement that I know Dave has been very helpful to me. Interesting thing, whenever I call him about an address, his comment is, I know which one you're talking about. So it's, it seems like it's a widespread problem, and these hazardous homes situations are pretty well known by everybody. I'd just like to, you know, if we could mitigate them, make them go away, that'd be wonderful.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever, I'm sure you have meetings with all the other fire chiefs in the county, the cities?
I think Mr. Boyce was at one just a short time ago.
Would it be helpful to have the fire chiefs of the county maybe do a list of the things that they would like to see happen as a statute, as an ordinance in the county and in the cities, and then bring that back to Ms. Schmelzer, and then we could address, the board could look at that and start to form some direction with that.
I think that might be an excellent idea. As a matter of fact, I think Chief Watson had suggested that if we were to form some kind of a committee to, and probably the fire chiefs would be a good place to start, and anybody else that has expertise in that area, we certainly welcome that. But we do meet on a monthly basis, and I think that might be a great starting place. So we just keep it where it can benefit everybody, and we kind of know who the players are that we need to
Simple,
address.
clean, 4, 5, 6 topics and how to deal with them, easily deal with them, and then we can move that forward.
I think that'd be outstanding.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks for your opportunity to chat with you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chief.
Mr. Fortman?
It's interesting hearing all the other jurisdictions' ideas. One of the questions that just came up about, for the judge, of issuing a citation and making it a condition of rescinding that citation or the fine. It's actually a tool that we're using in Curry County all the time. When I get to the point of issuing citations, I'm sitting there going, this will be filed with the court in 3 days, and if you fix this and before I can get to the court, I can rip it up. And I've had a 90% success rate when they've looked at the ticket and gone, ooh, I can't afford this.
Very good.
Some of the other hazards, I just want to point out that we have some other players we need to get in here is, it's not just sewage, it's electrical. It's a lot of ones. I was at a property yesterday where in Harbor where 2 trailers are living on a property with a house. They're all plugged in from a 30-amp circuit on the trailers to a 15-amp cord running 100 yards through the grass
8 amps.
into the house.
By the time it goes out of yard.
And we've had homes burned down, several because of this kind of situation. We need to reach out and reach to some of our commercial vendors like Coos Curry Electric. We have panels on, there was a property up in Middle County, far North County, I should say, that same situation, 12 RVs were plugged into an electrical panel, which was a nightmare. And the building official at the time tried to work with the vendor, Coos Curry, to pull the electrical panel, and there was no authority to do so. And they said, our panel's fine. It's on the other side. You need to do something. That property ended up burning down 7 of those trailers on that property. It's a situation where hearing the discussion about can we get resources out to people. We have a Veterans Affairs officer who has responded several times at my request to residents. Again, if you can't get the gentleman out or lady out of the residence to talk to them, we have problems. But I've learned we need to reach out and find out about courts and where they're at and maybe try to get some more people help. These, again, are issues that not only affect our individual properties, but they affect the neighbors. And I'm thinking of, again, I'll just take this one property, no garbage service, there was no sewage service, there's electrical cables feeding multiple trailers. The property owner was renting those trailers out at $500 a month to people. And all of those are running through the grass and weeds and all that. Well, what's really bad about it is situated next to a commercial repair facility with 50 cars in there, all the gasoline in the cars. And it's on a hillside that's like this, that my 5 years of serving with the fire department, and I know that fire is going to run up. And what's on the other end of that hill is Harbor's older RV parks that are all senior citizens in 30-year-old trailers, 40-year-old trailers that won't have a chance for the fire chief to get his equipment there if that kicks off. That's why, again, we need everybody to participate in this and identify these issues. And I'm grateful for people to say, this is time-consuming. And I'm grateful for his honor giving us some ideas of where we can go. We need the tools. And again, I'm going to salute the commissioners here because you've given tools. Sometimes, listening to Ms. Richards' issues, sometimes you go, how do I fix that house on Idaho? And it turns out the solution that came up for your house in Idaho is a building issue, an unsafe building issue, because it's got asbestos and falling down. So if we combine all of these codes together, then we find solutions. Even taking over animal control has been a solution where a person had an illegal camper plugged into their house. Their dog happened to get loose, run down, got injured, got impounded. And I'm going, okay, I can cite you for the dogs, I can cite you for this. What do you want to do? It's time consuming, but we got things done. 5% of the people out there, the cases are not going to be resolved at my level. They're going to come either through the courts and drag their way through, or they're going to come through county council doing administrative protracted issues, or they're going to come to you folks as the hearing officers for doing abatement. One of the cases at civil action, and I heard the question asked about banks and can banks step up. I talked to a lender, probably 3 or 4 that I'm dealing with, that the property is in such poor condition that they won't foreclose on the loan because they know they're going to pay $40,000, $50,000 just to clean it up to be able to sell it. So we have these properties rotting and not doing anything. So there are more issues out here than just sewage. There are life safety issues.
Well, Mr. Foreman, I hope that this board will continue to give you the resources you need to do your job. and to make sure the citizens of this county are protected, and I'm sure we will. So thank you all for coming. Commissioner Gold?
I think we need to talk about what are our next steps. Personally, I would like to see a smaller committee formed out of these folks to come up with possible steps, protocol that we could use so that this could be functioning in a way that's efficient and in the best interest of the county residents.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not opposed to a committee, but I think if we want to, as we talked earlier, just direct staff to see what would be involved here, and I'm going to go one step beyond. To the extent this problem is growing, almost accelerating, and not just in Curry County, but we have a chance here to make a difference. I think we want to look at one staff person plus a second code enforcement officer under CEO's direction, Fortman's direction, and we may be 2 or 3 months from now, a year from now, saying, wow, we need a third one of staff. So I hope that's not overextending, but I think that's the direction we need to go. And I see Councilor Huddle has his hand up, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Huddle?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just in response to Commissioner Gold's suggestion of a subcommittee to make recommendations, just want to remind you, when we do form a subcommittee that makes recommendations to the Board of Commissioners, then that subcommittee has to follow the public records and meetings laws with agendas, minutes, public access, those kind of things. I think for efficiency's sake, I think what Commissioner Boyce said, task staff with coming up with solutions. Then I think Officer Fortman, Director Schmelzer, they can work with all the other individuals in here on an informal basis and formulate their own recommendations. And then we can maybe come back to another meeting like this to talk about those. But that way you avoid multiple meetings and all that rigmarole. Thank you. Thank you.
Definitely.
As Commissioner Gold said, pulling everybody together, and that spirit, I think, is happening starting, well, it started before today. Okay. So I'm sure Director Schmelzer and her staff will figure out a way to pull the right people in and be an all-inclusive thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So can we ask for consensus, or is that appropriate right now?
I would say by our comments, that is a consensus.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. So we're going to end this part of the workshop. I'd like to just take a 5-minute quick recess, and then we'll go on with the forestry part of this. And it's
Area is that we still.
Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It gives me tremendous honor and a privilege to introduce a couple folks here real quick. Since I became commissioner, I've met some tremendous people, and as the citizens of Curry County listen when it comes to their backyard, the Kalmiopsis Wilderness, which is the most unique, the most wild, the most rugged forest, 2 million acres, Siskiyou National Forest in all of North America, at least the continental U.S. And so when, right after the Lewis and Clark expedition, a guy by the name of Jedediah Smith come through here with a Bible in one hand and a long rifle in the other, and he discovered the redwoods about 20 years after Lewis and Clark.
Excuse me one second, Mr. Boyce. Could you ask them to please quiet down out there? Thank you.
And so the most incredible forest in perhaps the world, arguably. When I first became commissioner, I wanted to serve on the AOCC board, and I had one public comment here, I think about our third meeting, the end of February. It said, because I wanted the environmental groups that, should I say, are insensitive to Curry County public needs, road requirements, certainly schools, law enforcement, for them to file an economic impact statement as well as an environmental impact statement. And I was told that I shouldn't be allowed to serve on that board. Well, since then, we've lost 300,000 acres in Curry County, 8 homes, and could have lost Brookings, nearly lost Agnes. So to have 2 people of this caliber that understand federal forest management, public lands management, highly, highly respected in the state of Oregon and in the Northwest, and to take the time to come down to Curry County today, I just can't thank you enough. First up is Amanda Astor, I serve on the Wild Rivers Coast Forest Collaborative with her, and her contributions are, needless to say, tremendous. And then I will introduce the second one in just a moment. Thank you for coming again.
Thank you.
So can we get the PowerPoint up?
For a nominal fee. Does she need the mouse?
Federal or the other one?
The federal one. Okay.
Why are our screens not coming up?
Eric?
Eric?
No, just hit the remote and power them on.
Oh, probably because they went silent for long enough, they shut themselves off? I don't think they do either.
You got the TV remote right there, just point it at the TVs and turn them on.
I see a red blinking light.
Shut that one off over there, though.
It's an art, not a science.
Maybe, yeah, here he comes.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Keegan.
Absolutely.
All righty.
Oh, to be young again.
Okay, sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
So I'm Amanda Astor. I'm Southwest Oregon Field Forester for the American Forest Resource Council. I cover the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, the Umpqua National Forest, the Coos Bay, Roseburg, Medford, and Lakeview BLM districts as well. So I monitor those action agencies and what they do with our federal forest lands. Oh, I forgot.
My dad's the only other one I ever heard call it a clicker before.
I don't know. I grew up in Minnesota, and they call it a clicker, so remote. Oops. It's a clicker. Okay. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of what AFRC does. AFRC is an acronym for the American Forest Resource Council. So we are a regional trade association. You can see our mission statement up there, but basically we're kind of like that liaison between the timber industry and then the federal agencies. So we work on multiple different levels. And so, oops, keep doing that. So as a Southwest Oregon Field Forester, I work kind of on the lowest rung. I work with our local BLM districts and Forest Service national forests. We also have individuals that I work with who work at more at the regional level and the state office level, so that's Forest Service and BLM. And then we also have individuals who work at the Washington office level and with our congressional staff up in Washington as well, so senators and representatives for our different states, not only the state of Oregon. AFRC also covers, so we cover Oregon, we also cover California, Washington, Idaho, and parts of Montana. So we're not just in Oregon, we have most of our membership is here in Oregon and in Washington. In Washington, we also cover DNR land, so that's state land as well, because our members buy a lot of timber from the state as well. So we're not only federal, we also do state land, so mostly public lands, you could say. And so what I do here at the local level is I comment on NEPA projects, so that's in National Environmental Policy Act, where the agencies have to disclose any sort of environmental impacts that they're going to make on the federal land and have to bring in the public. So as part of the industry, I provide that public input from the industry on federal projects. I also have to go to those projects, so I'm in the field a lot, out in the woods a lot. I also participate on collaboratives as Commissioner Boyce said. I meet with the agency personnel a lot, talking to them about issues that come up with implementation. So looking at things such as restrictions or things that come up that don't allow the purchasers to feasibly extract the timber or manage the land. And then I also work a lot with our members. So our members are those purchasers of federal or public wood. So I'm going to give you an overview of both the BLM and the Forest Service. So I'm going to start with the Forest Service. So this is kind of that broader, higher level aspect. So the Forest Service original national target was 3.7 billion board feet. And I'm just going to be talking about the timber aspects here. Their updated national target went down to 3.27 billion board feet, and there's some national target held at the WO right now of 420 million board feet. We're in Region 6 here, that's Oregon and Washington states, and the target this year for fiscal year 19 is 720 million board feet, and again, that was updated to 676.8 million board feet. So the reason for that update had to do with fire funding. So when a big fire season happens, like we had last year and a lot of the previous years before that, money comes out of the what's called the PERMs and trust funds. And so when that money gets taken away, it's supposed to get repaid the next year back to the different regions, and then that goes down to the forests. So that just got repaid, and we're in almost basically the fourth quarter of the fiscal year. So basically that updated target has to do with the agency's understanding that there was really no time to plan for using that money, and that's why that target has been decreased. But now that money has been given to the agencies, organizations like ours, AFRC, we're going to be monitoring next year's outputs to try to account for that increase of money that they typically would have already gotten. So we're going to be monitoring that pretty closely. So the Forest Service forest that you guys have here in your county is the Rogue River Siskiyou. So their target is 43 million feet for this year. They've currently sold 26.5 million board feet, and they have planned 3 more sales this fiscal year, which would equate to 13.2 additional million board feet. If they are to sell all of those additional sales at the estimated volumes, they would be achieving about 94% of their target. I anticipate that 1 to 2 of those sales are not going to sell. They're salvage. We're going to get into that when I start talking about the Chetco fire. But the other sale that accounts for about 11 million of those 13 is likely to sell. It's a green sale, high value timber. So they're going to be up there. They're not likely to get their target this year. And I want to make that clear that that's something that they understand. And so that's kind of where we're at. So we're going to be expecting a lot out of them next year.
Could you say that again, please, Ms. Astor? The very last part there.
I'm going to be expecting a lot out of them next year.
Thank you. I thought so.
So as far as the BLM, you guys don't have a whole lot of ONC lands here in this county, but you do. You have the Coos Bay BLM and parts of the Medford BLM here. I'm going to primarily be focusing on the Coos Bay side of things. But generally, like I said, this is that higher level. Their full RMP, which is their resource management plan, came out in 2016. Full implementation of that is 278 million board feet. This year they were budgeted for 242, but we've been told by the state office that they're striving to get to that full implementation this year. So although they've only been budgeted for 242, they're striving, and that's their words, that's a quote from a BLM staffer, that they're striving to get to that 278 this year. So again, we're looking at that really strongly and trying to monitor them on that. And I do want to remind you, as it says on the bottom here, that they are attributed their target volume when they offer the sale, not when it's sold. So they can offer a sale. If it doesn't sell, they still get that target. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that is important, especially it should be to you guys who then get a portion of the proceeds from the ONC counties. And we'll go into that more later in my presentation. So the bulk of this presentation is just going to be about projects. So I have it split into projects within Curry County and projects just outside of Curry County, because those projects do impact your constituents. And a lot of people who work in this county rely on those projects that happen just outside of your county as well. So here's a map. All of these little circles and squares that are different colors, those are all the projects I'm going to talk about. You can see it covers a large proportion of your county, and right in the middle of the Rogue River Siskiyou is where the Kalmiopsis Wilderness is. So that's why there are no circles in that area, because it's a wilderness and you cannot do any forest management within that location. So I'm going to talk about probably the most contentious thing first, and that's the Chetco Bar Fire. So the Chetco Bar Fire burned about 190,000 acres in 2017. About 170,000 of those are on Forest Service land. About 85% of that 170,000 acres are lands where salvage and management is limited or not allowed. So most of that was in the Kalmiopsis, as said before. And some of that is also in riparian areas, the late successional habitat for spotted owl. So there's other things that limit what the Forest Service can do. So then, you only have really 15% of that burned area that they could even choose from. So in their proposal, so when they came out with the NEPA, they had 4,000, a little bit over 4,000 acres proposed for treatment, for salvage treatment, about 300 miles of roads that they were going to be treating for danger trees and just road work as well. And that was going to equate what they estimated as about 70 million board feet to come off of that. So what have they implemented? Within this time from when they had the fire till now, about 44% of the proposed land has been treated and implemented, which equates to about 30 million board feet. And I got the numbers earlier, and so it was actually 1,800 acres have been treated. So again, about 4,000 acres is what they proposed, and they've treated a total of about 1,800. And they've treated about 115 miles of road of that 300 that they originally wanted to treat. So I thought that would be something you guys would be very interested in. And then in addition, about 3 to 4 of the sales haven't even started yet. And as far as the sales that have sold, they haven't been logged on yet. And even the sales that are being logged on right now and have active operations, they're already being logged on at a deficit. So as in the price that they paid for the logs is not the price that they're going to be able to get. So they're, constituents that you have in this county are bringing logs back to their mills and cannot get what they paid for them. Yeah, and so I'm going to go into some of the things that have happened from this. I did want to also mention that there's 4 sales that have been dropped that were planned originally, which equated to 13 million board feet. And so that's 13 million board feet that was planned but unsold volume. And there's no intention to sell that volume again. And I'm going to go into the reasons why. So the first thing is that we have to think about when we think about salvage is timing. Timing is everything when it comes to this wood. Timing ties in with number 3, deterioration. The longer we go without salvaging that wood, the more deterioration it has. Most of the moisture has been sucked out of that environment. That wood doesn't last very long. Bugs are usually already there. The Doug fir beetle goes and kills trees, and then the boring insects will then aerate our wood, which is not what we want in building products. And so those are things that, timing is huge when it comes to the success of a project that has to do with salvage. So the quicker we can get it out to the market, the faster or the more success those projects will have. The second thing with this area specifically, and this is me in the picture, all the pictures that I have in here are ones that I took. And so that's me in the picture if you see the little person in orange. So you can see these trees are pretty small. Not all the trees were this size out there, but a lot of trees are small. It's second growth. And you can see the bark sloughing off of the top. That white stuff at the top, that's because the bark is no longer there. It's sloughed off, it's fallen off, and that's just, that wood is no longer good. And this was not very long after the fire happened, so you can see how stressed those trees were before the fire even occurred in this area. And not every area was the same. Some areas held it better than others, but a lot of them looked like this. So I do want to make that aware to you guys too, that what they had to work with out there, what they thought they had was actually really not what they had. And some of that difference in volume actually came because this fourth one, the costly logging systems and road work, There's a lot of helicopter ground in there, and helicopter is extremely expensive, even when they do appraise for it correctly. It's really, really expensive. It's up to like 600,000 an acre, or $600 a thousand board feet. So 1 MBF per MBF. So it's extremely costly and expensive. So they took all of that right out from the get-go, which was included in that 4,000 acres that they proposed. They also decreased the merchantability specifications, so that's what they are going to make the logger take. And what they're going to leave on the land. So if those are really low, the risk is really high for the purchaser because they're going to probably have to take a lot of stuff back to the mill that is not going to pencil out. That's not going to be economical anymore because it's going to be so deteriorated and so gone. So, that's some of the reasons why those numbers are different, is because as they started to look at what was feasible and implementable, a lot of things started coming off the plate. So what they proposed originally, that really wound down into what they actually proposed or actually planned, and then that has even gone further because number 5, the market downturn. So 2018 we saw record numbers for the timber market. That makes people really afraid sometimes because, whenever something is really, really high, unusually high, it's going to fall. So that just added extra risk associated with buying these sales that are already decreasing in value, whereas you have a green sales that are, the trees are still living. Those are only going up in value. They're growing bigger, they're growing stronger typically. It's going the opposite way. So having that high market, knowing that the market was going to downturn, seeing a market downturn pretty fast, really, really fast, that only compounded the effects of the Chetco fire and the success that we would have liked to have not really being there. And then lastly, the lack of competition. So because of where the Chetco fire happened and the access into that area, you really only have 1, 2, maybe 3 mills that can, purchasers, let's say, not mills, but purchasers that can compete for that wood feasibly and economically. And so when you only have basically 1 mill that can compete for that wood, that's just going to create even less, the potential for less success. So I just wanted to point all those things out to you because sometimes we can get tunnel vision and look at one thing, but there's so many things here that it was kind of like a lot of things right now. It's kind of been the perfect storm, unfortunately.
Perfect comment, though.
Yeah, so then the BLM also sold a sale from the Chetco fire. They proposed 140 acres with no volume estimation. They implemented 139 acres. The extra acre was of road work. So road clearing, road right-of-way, and they sold 2 million board feet. So you can see here these purple lines, and then the green little blobs within the red is what the BLM sold. And they used a categorical exclusion, which allowed them to get it out a lot quicker and have a lot more success and actually have competition for the wood that they sold. So I'm gonna probably run through these really quick. So Shasta Agnes is a project. You guys actually have a map right up there. That's fantastic. I was happy to see that. Court was out there in the field with me. Primarily, this project is about restoring a unique habitat, which is oak woodlands and oak savannas. There's other things associated with this project as well, but to me, that's the main component of this project. So here's a picture that I took in the yellow circle. You can see kind of a yellow hard hat. That's a person, a male adult, next to a tree. You can see I have a pointer to an oak tree, and then you can see the encroaching Douglas fir. So this is the problem in the area, and this is the reason for the project primarily, is to try to enhance and basically restore this oak that we have out there in the Agnes area. That's if nothing is done, basically something will eventually happen. The Douglas fir are starting to die out of there, but it's not going to happen in a timely manner. It's not going to happen before the next fire, I'll tell you that for sure. And so alternative one is the alternative that AFRC supports. It's about 24 million board feet, treating just shy of 6,700 acres. And like I said, primarily oak restoration, also some Douglas fir plantations that are getting thinned in there, and riparian thinnings make up the most of the treatment in this project. And the Forest Service has accepted public comment on that, and so the next step, we're going to be awaiting their final EIS.
And that's the local district ranger's decision, right?
Yeah, we'll be awaiting their decision on that. So this is the same sort of map as you guys have up here. The orange, Agnes is right in the middle there. If you guys are familiar with this, it's kind of hard to do without a pointer. But right kind of in the middle of that orange is where Agnes is. The orange is all the oak restoration. The dark green, mostly here on the right, is the plantation thinnings. And then I do want to point out that the red is all prescribed fire. So they are trying to get fire back into that landscape as well. So the last two projects that are within your county, there's Rock Lobster and then Windchuck. These are potential names and potential areas. The Forest Service has not come out with any scoping on these projects. They're just ones that I've been told are potentials moving forward. So most likely the Forest Service will be looking at one of these two areas for their next project after Shasta Agnes, but it could be a different place too. But it's highly likely that it's going to be one of these two. And again, the names could change, the boundaries could slightly change as well, but just something to look for in the future. So now going slightly outside of the county, and I don't have very many. So this is the Eden Ridge project. It's just south of Powers. It's in that little island that the Forest Service has kind of just north of the main kind of blob, shall you say, of the Rogue River Siskiyou that's here in your county. This is a very productive area. As you can see from the top, I've put the numbers of proposed in their environmental assessment and then what they have implemented. They only have 2 more sales in this area, and it's Trestle in the kind of turquoise blue color, and then Incline in the kind of salmon color, pink color. And those sales are actually going to account for a total of 63.5 million board feet once sold, if they're sold at estimated volumes. And so that's actually going to be an increase of 13 million feet from what they proposed. So they're actually getting more out of this area than they thought they were going to be. And in total, they're going to be treating about 3,700 acres, including these 2 sales. So they're actually going to be treating slightly more, and that can be due to many reasons, mostly GIS and GPS kind of accuracies from when they plan to when they actually implement. So things do change around. So these 2 sales are going to make up a lot of volume for them. Incline is coming out this year, and that's going to be that 11.5 million feet that is likely to increase their volume outputs this year. And then Trestle, the one in the kind of green-blue, that one is going to be sold next year, and it's likely to be split up into a few different sales. So the next one is a BLM project. It's just north of your county. It's called Upper Rock Creek. Again, you can see what was proposed and then what's been implemented. A total of 12 sales are supposed to be coming out of this project area between FY19 and FY21. The next sale is going to be advertised on July 20, or is going to be auctioned on July 26th, so that's on Friday, I think. And it's going to add an additional 35 acres of regeneration harvest and 1.8 million board feet to the total that they've completed thus far. So this one's roaring and boring. It's on its way. And the ability for the BLM to utilize regeneration harvest now is a great tool for them to be able to not only meet their obligatory targets, but also create more early cereal habitat and other types of habitat that they have been deficient in on their lands for a long time. So the next one is this is my last one. It's Forest Service. This is the Upper Briggs area. So this project was mostly for fire resiliency in the landscape. And this area is where the Taylor Creek fire and the Klondike fire basically converged. Every day I was looking at the map saying, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And yes, it did happen. They converged right in this project area. But we had an inversion layer, which made the fire effects a lot less severe than they could have been, which is great because we still have a lot of work that needs to happen in this area. And so right now they have proposed about 4,000 acres of treatment, about just under 30 million board feet. The Forest Service has heard objection resolutions in an objection resolution meeting, and so we'll be waiting for their final decision. That should be coming up next. And here's a map of this. You can see down on the bottom where we had some higher fire severity. And then most of it's green. So green means good, basically. Red means bad. And, higher severity. So you can see most of these polygons, most of the little colored blobs, actually had very low to no fire in them. And so finally, to wrap up today, I just want to say, you guys as the county and representing the county, your local government and the agencies should be working with you guys on these projects. You can ask to be involved in these projects. For Upper Briggs, we had county commissioners there talking about road issues. So you guys have all the power to comment for your constituents on these projects that are happening within your county boundaries, or even outside of them if you feel like they affect your constituents. And so with the Forest Service, probably looking at those two standards is the best, within your county or slightly outside of your county if you think that your constituents are being dependent on those projects. And then for the BLM, with ONC, because of the way that the ONC money works, you guys get a portion, for the amount that you guys have in your county, split up between all of the different BLM districts. So from that standard, if you guys wanted to comment on a project in Northwest Oregon, you guys could, because the more that they're doing up there, the more likely that you guys are to get even more for your services here in this county, even for the small proportion that you do get. But if nobody's doing anything, then you guys don't get anything. So I just wanted to say, if you do want to get involved, you can always reach out to AFRC. We would love to share our comments with you if you are just interested in hearing what we have to say about it. There's lots of other people that you can talk to out there too, or the collaborative like Court's on. So thank you guys so much for talking, and hopefully I provided at least a good overview of what's going on in your county on the federal land.
Thank you.
Are you going to stick around in case you have questions?
Yeah, I'll stick around.
A little bit after Mr. Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I'm not sure how to change it up there.
Oh,
Minimum?
yes, sir.
About 30 minutes max, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Nick Smith. I am executive director of an organization called Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities, and we're a nonprofit advocacy organization. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do. But generally, I just want to say that we really exist to make Amanda's job easier. Amanda works on the ground level. From the ground level to 10,000 feet. I tend to operate up in the 30 to 40,000 foot level where the policy tends to intersect with the politics. But really it's to enable to Amanda and the public lands agencies to do what they do, and also really to make your jobs easier as county commissioners. And I'll explain why in a second. So I'll tell you a little bit about Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities. Let's see, can we maximize that?
Did you bring me some more brochures?
I did not, sorry.
I'm going to be looking for those. Minimize those hidden that top right corner.
Oops. Oh, this is that something you're able to do from your computer?
Just go to slideshow.
The top.
See it on the top, slideshow? And then from the beginning.
Okay. So we started Healthy Forests, Healthy Communities back in 2013, and what we are is we're a grassroots coalition that really advocates for three things. Solutions, particularly those at the congressional level, that promote active multiple use management of our federal forest lands, those that create jobs and economic opportunities in our rural forested communities, and those solutions that provide stable revenues for rural county governments and other essential services.
I operate in the Pacific Northwest, so I work everywhere from Northern California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Western Montana. We also have our program running in Colorado and the Great Lakes area. The common thread between those areas, lots of federal forest land. And there's a common thread between all of those regions where lots of federal forest land, a lot of federal forest land that in our opinion is not being managed. There are, both environmental and social economic consequences to those. So we work with a broad coalition of folks, certainly elected officials, business, labor, law enforcement, educators, others, all kinds of folks who have a stake in federal forest management issues. We have a grassroots network of 230,000 folks that we get engaged in these issues, and we do a lot of press stuff. So, really what we try to do is we try to get more folks, particularly in rural forested communities, more involved, I'd say positively in federal land management issues, getting them engaged with their elected officials, particularly at the federal level, so that, those elected officials can hear, the stories that need to be told, and hopefully we can get some good solutions for our communities. And, really today, I just want to, my really only ask here today is just for you to see us as a partner. Certainly I do a lot of work with Rocky, with the Association of O&C Counties, the Sustainable Forest Action Coalition, work closely with AFRC, individual commissioners such as Commissioner Boyce. So, generally where we fit in among, all of these issues is that, we provide that grassroots and communication support for, better forest management in our opinion. And so, really the first few years of this program, we were heavily involved in the O&C issue, certainly supportive of the bipartisan O&C Trust Act, the Walden-Fazio-Schrader bill. Of course, we didn't get that long-term solution that I think we still continue to need, but we're still working with Rocky and the other commissioners, and hopefully we can get some long-term solutions. So certainly getting involved in issues such as trying to have our elected officials at the congressional level understand the need for that long-term solution. We've also gotten involved in the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument issue because of how it essentially took O&C lands off the table. Kind of one example of sort of some of the stuff that I do is recently I worked with the White House on an event that was this month on July 8th. Representative David Brock-Smith was along with us, as well as Commissioner Colleen Roberts from Jackson County, and really it was an opportunity for Commissioner Roberts to stand alongside the president, talk about the need for forest management, better wildfire response. So I want to tell you about some of the positive things. I want to be positive today, and I want to paint a picture that progress is being made on the federal forest management side, and so I'm not going to go through these in detail, but I want to give you just a sense for some of the bipartisan solutions that Congress has passed. In the omnibus bill passed in March of 2018, there was a solution for wildfire funding so that the Forest Service, when it exhausts its wildfire suppression budget, it is not taking money away from forest management accounts, so there's less disruption for Forest Service operations. Good Neighbor Authority, the last Congress provided improvements to Good Neighbor Authority. Programs in various states allowing G&A projects to do forest roads and maintenance. Amanda talked about NEPA and categorical exclusions. They offered a new categorical exclusion for wildfire resiliency projects. They amended the Bush Area Healthy Forest Restoration Act to allow the creation of fuel breaks and fire breaks. There was some, Congress addressed what's called the cottonwood issue, and I won't really go into that detail, but it provided some litigation relief, and of course, an extension of Secure Rural Schools timber payments program. On the 2018 Farm Bill, there was an extension of the 3,000-acre insect and disease categorical exclusion, an expansion of Good Neighbor Authority to counties and tribes. It's a little unclear how, what Good Neighbor is essentially is it allows the Forest Service to work with other jurisdictions, and in most cases states, to do that cross-boundary forest management work. Congress expanded Good Neighbor Authority to allow counties and tribes. We'll see how that works. Things like Timber Innovation Act, doubling of the Collaborative Forest Restoration Act spending to $80 million. But a lot of the action really has been on the administration side, and that is where the president signed an executive order promoting active forest management of America's forests, directing the land management agencies to use all of the tools and resources to do more treatments on the ground. The Interior Secretary signed a similar order, but really for today, I want to focus on one thing, which I'll talk about in a minute, but that is the Forest Service effort to make their processes more efficient in terms of how they develop and implement forest projects. Also, on the NEPA side, the White House Council on Environmental Quality has been revising its NEPA regulations, and then the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has been in the process of revising its Endangered Species Act rules, mainly in terms of how it regards critical habitat and evaluating areas currently occupied by a species before considering unoccupied areas for critical habitat designations. So generally, across the board, the U.S. Forest Service, we are seeing timber volumes that haven't been seen since the 1990s. Region 6, the growth has been a little more modest at 10%, but we've had an increase of over 10% in timber volume, now at 3.196 billion board feet nationally. But the one thing that I want to note is that, even at these outputs at, really 1990s levels, we're still only a little over half of the harvest levels permitted in current forest plans. So there's, opportunities to get more work done on the ground. So I want to talk about the Forest Service proposed NEPA regulations, because this is an area where, I think the agency could do well to make its forest project planning and implementation more efficient. Really, when you look at federal forest management and all of the obstacles, certainly litigation is an issue. The budget shortfalls that these agencies are encountering are a big issue, but it's really process and the slow pace that it can take for the Forest Service to do the projects that we need to be done on the ground to reduce the risks of wildfire, to provide timber for our communities. And I won't spend a ton of time on this, but just to illustrate, the average time for a Forest Service environmental impact statement has grown from 817 days to over 1,300 days. And the average time for an environmental assessment is now 730 days, whereas a categorical exclusion, as Amanda had mentioned in some of the projects she works on, takes 183 days. The Forest Service spends $356 million annually just to conduct NEPA analysis and compliance requirements on forest management projects. And, we're, basically this is at a time when over 80 million acres of national forest system lands are at immediate risk of wildfire, insects, and disease. So, due to chronic budget shortfalls and personnel shortfalls, The agency is, at most, is only capable of treating 4% of these acres every year. So the Forest Service just launched an effort to, they've released new proposed NEPA rules that, really seek to increase efficiency, reduce costs and analysis and decision-making, especially where it makes sense, on decisions relating to forest management, recreation, and infrastructure. And this is one issue that, I would encourage the county to take really a close look at. A lot of the NEPA rule changes are really focused on things like recreation, special use permits, infrastructure. There is also a new categorical exclusion for forest restoration. It's a 7,300 acre forest restoration CE with a maximum of 4,200 acres of mechanical treatment. So that doesn't mean that it will, it would log up to 4,200 acres. It really depends on what the project is trying to do, what the forest plan says that these national forests need to do, and in cases where it makes sense, this is a categorical exclusion that the Forest Service could use to do more quickly. So the Forest Service is accepting comments at regulation.gov through August 12th. If you're interested in this process and seeing the Forest Service do more quickly, this is something I would encourage you to take a look at. So now for a little more contentious issue, and one issue that I want to draw to your attention. Nationally, a lot of the focus is on, broadly, how can we improve forest management? How can we get ahead of the real forest health crisis that, we're seeing in our country? In Southwest Oregon, it's, the debate's a little different. And, lately the discussion, Southwest Oregon tends really not to be, how can we do more treatment, but, what is being done on land designations. And here I am in an unenviable task of sometimes of trying to explain that designations such as wilderness is sometimes not a good idea. And so I want to draw your attention to two bills. The first was the Oregon Wildlands Act that passed earlier this year. Commissioner Boyce worked with you on this issue a little bit. But there was some concerning things with that package overall. Just real briefly, it kind of started as a laundry list of things, some of which have spilled onto additional legislation, but particularly we were concerned about an addition of 125 miles of wild and scenic designations on the Rogue River, and not just the Rogue, but really a lot of its tributaries, which tend to be dry most of the years, and from a sort of a public lands, land management, fuel reduction standpoint, we found that very concerning. And there was a Chetco wild and scenic designation that was really more technical in nature. It decreased the recreation section by 1.5 miles. It withdrew 19 miles from entry and related to mineral activities. But really, I want to draw your attention to a bill that's currently pending and has already received a hearing. And I've got some handouts. Can I give these to you?
I've not seen this. Wow.
Basically, some of the items that didn't make it into the last public lands package have been added into what is called the ORR Act, the Oregon Recreation Enhancement Act, introduced by Senators Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley. Basically what it does is, I'll run through these, but, I want to show you the map. Being in the county offices here, I've had the opportunity to look at the various maps, and, certainly, you have maps of the Klondike fire, and, basically what what this bill seeks to do is it seeks to expand the wild rogue wilderness, essentially all the way down to the wildland urban interface towards Galice and Merlin in Josephine County. But it expands the wild rogue wilderness by 60,000 acres. It creates a 98,000 acre recreation area adjacent to the wild rogue wilderness. The one really concerning thing to me is that it basically works to put these land designations in the wildland urban interface near communities that have been identified as being at high risk of wildfire already. Both the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management have registered their opposition to the bill, and I've included their testimonies in the packet for you, basically arguing that these land designations would make their jobs more difficult in terms of forest management, fuel reduction, maintaining access on these lands. So I think this is a piece of legislation you're going to be hearing more about going forward, and I just wanted to alert you to that and just some of the concerns that we have with it. So I'm going to stop there. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm having a lot of fun with Senator Merkley's staff on this bill you're talking about, and I think we're having a little bit of a pushback in a kind of a cordial way, and just at some point I may recommend to the board that we support this, but right now I'm not there yet. I'm going to be talking to a lot of citizens in Curry County, and but Senator Wyden's staff's been very helpful on some other issues, and so that's a benefit to us. I think you've been helping Curry County before I got here. I know you have, and through your work with ONC, and I had heard or learned but forgot that you started in 2013, and I just want to emphasize that your connection with Jackson County Commissioner Colleen Roberts. Ms. Astor had a wonderful article in the Eugene Register Guard 2 months ago, and I meant to get that on our website, and I will. I want the citizens to see the rational, common sense approach that letter has. And of course, when you talk about fire suppression, that is, I think that really resonates well with so many of our citizens, and it comes back to that healthy management. I don't have anything else other than just great gratitude to both of you. I hope you'll come back maybe in a year, and I'm sure you're making your rounds to the other counties. If not, I'll sure send a very, very high recommendation. Just tremendous work. The benefit to our citizens is greatly measurable.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank you all for coming as well. I appreciate the presentation and the time and energy it took to put that together, and we will look into some of this. And again, I appreciate the travel down here. We're kind of in a little time constraint to get to.
We have to be in Port Orford in a little bit for our
minutes.
first evening meeting, our first out of Gold Beach meeting.
Again, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.